is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path.
First reading. A reading from the second book of Samuel, chapter 18, verse 9, verse 10, verse 14, verses 24 to 25, verse 30, and chapter 19, verse 3. Absalom unexpectedly came up against David's servants. He was mounted on a mule, and as the mule passed under the branches of a large terebinth, his hair caught fast in the tree. He hung between heaven and earth, while the mule he had been riding ran off. Someone saw this and reported to Joab that he had seen Absalom hanging from a terebinth, and taking 3 pikes in hand, he thrust for the heart of Absalom, still hanging from the tree alive. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and a lookout went up to the roof of the gate above the city wall, where he looked about and saw a man running all alone. The lookout shouted to inform the king, who said, "If he is alone, he has good news to report." The king said, "Step aside and remain in attendance here." So he stepped aside and remained there. When the Cushite messenger came in, he said, "Let my lord the king receive the good news that this day the Lord has taken your part, freeing you from the grasp of all who rebelled against you." But the king asked the Cushite, "Is young Absalom safe?" The Cushite replied, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rebel against you with evil intent be as that young man." The king was shaken and went up to the room over the city gate to weep. He said as he wept, "My son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Absalom, my son, my son." Joab was told that the king was weeping and mourning for Absalom, and that the day's victory was turned into mourning for the whole army, when they heard that the king was grieving for his son. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel of St. Mark, chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him, and he stayed close to the sea. One of the synagogue officials, named Jairus, came forward. Seeing him, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, saying, "My daughter is at the point of death. Please come lay your hands on her, that she may get well and live." He went off with him, and a large crowd followed him. There was a woman afflicted with hemorrhages for 12 years. She had suffered greatly at the hands of many doctors and had spent all that she had. Yet she was not helped, but only grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. She said, "If I but touch his clothes, I shall be cured." Immediately her flow of blood dried up. She felt in her body, and she was healed of her affliction. Jesus, aware at once that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who has touched my clothes?" But his disciples said to him, "You see how the crowd is pressing upon you, and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" And he looked around to see who had done it. The woman, realizing what had happened to her, approached in fear and trembling. She fell down before Jesus and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be cured of your affliction." While he was still speaking, people from the synagogue official's house arrived and said, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher any longer?" Disregarding the message that was reported, Jesus said to the synagogue official, "Do not be afraid. Just have faith. He did not allow anyone to accompany him inside except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they arrived at the house of the synagogue official, he caught sight of a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. So he went in and said to them, "Why this commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but asleep." And they ridiculed him. Then he put them all out. He took along the child's father and mother and those who were with him and entered the room where the child was. He took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha koum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." The girl, a child of 12, arose immediately and walked around, and that they were utterly astounded. He gave strict orders that no one should know this and said that she should be given something to eat. This is the gospel of the Lord.
My dear friends, we are given the great message of the power of faith in Jesus in today's gospel. In our infirmities, in our sicknesses, in our human weaknesses, we need to turn to Jesus and ask for His power, my dear friends. But that power comes also with the power of faith that we have. In the gospel, we hear that a little girl was healed by Jesus. It was because they kept faith in Jesus, invited Jesus into their house, and Jesus raised the child with His hand, and it was the power of faith that healed this girl. And also the woman with hemorrhages, when she touched the fringe of the cloak of Jesus, she had great faith that she will be healed. My dear friends, in our ordinary ways of life, sometimes we doubt. When we have sicknesses, when we have problems, when we have pain, even though we seek the help of God, we seek the help of Jesus, we also doubt, and sometimes we are in anxiety. But my dear friends, we are called upon to keep complete faith in Jesus in all our troubles and problems, so that by the power of our faith, Jesus will heal us. And in today's world, my dear friends, as we see people are going through all kinds of problems, struggles, and sicknesses and diseases, we are called upon to place our trust in Jesus with that, once again, our power of faith. And that is our response, that is our share, that is our part in the healing process of our souls and our bodies. Therefore, let us turn to Jesus and have that sure power of faith in Jesus in order to receive His healing and strength.